Welcome back. You're watching Cheche, the show where opinion counts. I'll read another text now. Positions are given to serve people. How will they be given to people who are to fail the president? Now, we've all been talking about, you've talked about different ways in which the president can try and unite this country. You're talking about appointments and dialogue. First, I'll start with you, Charles. You talked about dialogue just before we took a break. When you talk about dialogue, what kind of dialogue do you have in mind? Because this is a president already who's going to be sworn in next week. Does that weaken his position when he goes to say we're having dialogue again with the opposition? What kind of dialogue are you talking about?
I'm not talking about dialogue as far as dishing out positions are concerned. I'm talking about dialogue in a progressive way. Where do we move from here? What are your grievances? Do we have room to accommodate them? What shortcomings do you see? What ideas would you give? You are an alternative leader, so that we move this country forward. That's the kind of dialogue I'm talking about. And I agree with the people who are saying Jubilee has professionals across the country. Yes, they do. The issue is not even appointments to positions of authority. The issue is distribution of national cake. I keep giving this example. I will still give it. If you go to Rift Valley and tell somebody the government has done so well in rural electrification program, they will agree with you because they are seeing it practically. Shacks and shanties are connected to the national grid. If you go to Nyanza, South Nyanza, for example, and tell somebody the government is doing so well in rural electrification program, they would ask you where? Because big businesses, big houses, and such property do not have connection to power. So it's all about distribution of the national wealth more than the positions. Positions benefit individuals.
Okay. But take it.
I don't think the president has any choice but to have a dialogue. And I think the way he has talked is like he might want to have dialogue.
What kind of dialogue?
Because we don't want another Annan here. It is very embarrassing to have foreigners come to tell us, clean your house.
Yeah.
Oh, your children are dirty. Take them to school. We need to do it ourselves because we know it's the right thing to do. So the dialogue I'm thinking about is, like he says, what we know, for instance, there are many Luos who are in government, in big positions and parastatals. But yet, according to NASA, it's only 2 tribes that rule this country, the Kalenjin and the Kikuyus. But we know many of them, even top. Find out why are these people dissatisfied. How can you make you happy? Like he says, is it power? If you are going to give power to everybody. Is it Tamak Road? If you compare Moi time and the Kibaki time and now, there are so many roads all over the place. If there is no power in Nyanza, and if that's what they are complaining about, give them power, electricity.
And he's to reach out to who? Raila personally?
I think
that's why I'm asking you what kind of dialogue. I don't think
they just go to Sagana Lodge, the way the Kibaki and Raila went. Go to Sagana Lodge or someplace. After that, in thinking, go and talk. After all, they call themselves brother. My brother.
But you remember Kibaki and Raila were in a coalition government, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the difference.
They don't have to have a coalition government. In fact, I don't. Even the NASA saying they don't want to know Mukate. They wanted a full bread, but they won't get it now anyway. But I don't think there will be any harm in them sitting together, talking and say what are the issues, and convincing those people in NASA that they belong to the government, and so that they can feel they belong to the government. Because unless they feel they are in government, then we're in trouble.
Let's not preempt any talks that are going to take place, if they're going to take place. But we've already had Charles and Mutegi, and you've all been following this, Dr. Kinyo and Professor Kodia, that the government has been saying, even before the Supreme Court decision on Monday, we are going to talk, but it will not be on the purview or in the realm of elections again.
But that cannot be a subject now.
But NASA insists any talks must be centered on elections, elections justice, and they're talking about constitutionalism, electoral justice, yes, and constitutional and constitutionalism. Isn't that a problem already?
Why are they insisting on that, on election? Because they want to believe if you have electoral reforms the way they want it, then they will be able to get into positions of leadership people who will ensure that the national resources are distributed fairly, because they feel the current dispensation, which has been elected through the electoral provisions we have now, are not distributing it fairly. So the bottom line, Hussein, is distribution of national resources.
So, Dr. Kenya, sorry.
Number one, it's not good that when you go for dialogue somewhere, you have conditions. Number one, it's not good to have conditions, preconditions before you go to dialogue. Number one. But at the end of the day, you
have to have an agenda.
You have to have an agenda, yes. At the end of the day, also, you realize that we have many gaps in our constitution. For example, my brother Hussein, we have a leader of opposition, which we hear. And, but when you look at it, it's as if the constitution does not cover that thing well, because you are just leader of opposition sitting at your home watching people debating in the parliament. So what powers do you have? So I think the constitution itself has some gaps which have to be filled, and especially the issue of maybe the leader of opposition and the deputy leader of opposition. So those are some of the things which, for example, if the constitution takes care of them, then I think there'll be no problem in future. Because you'll go to elections, then if you lose and you become leader of opposition, then you also have a stake and you have some power also to speak, not only to do like Raila Odinga was doing, speaking from home. There's a problem, but you speak from your own home. There should be an office somewhere of leader of opposition in this country who should have protection, who should have even security. Those are some of the things which the constitution should be addressing, and I think that's what they are looking at. And the danger of having electoral reforms with the situation we are having because even now, I don't know if we will have an opposition in this country. I don't see it. I don't know.
Why do you say that?
Because the one who now becomes the head of opposition, if it becomes this guy who came number 2, for example, does he have parliamentarians? Does he have governors? Does he have senators? There'll be a problem. I think those are some of the things our constitution should be filling. Those are the gaps to be filled in the constitution.
Okay, Prof.
Yes, I think the first thing we need to take into cognizance is the fact that we are learning from our mistakes, but too slowly. Yeah, that's what I can say. Yeah, because when we talk of national dialogue, what is the agenda? What are the issues at stake? Constitutional review should be a priority in the next government. First, like what my colleagues are saying here, the winner takes all. That has really marginalized many people. If the president is to go across the nation to ensure that every region is represented in his government, yeah, Mutegi said it, he will go for the people who are supporting him. But it's not always true that the people who had been supporting the president may be the people's choice down there. So this is the reason why I'm saying we need to look at our constitution again. How can people be represented in the national government, even though they may not be part of the winning party? What is happening today is that someone said that I overheard someone saying in your previous debate here that Nyanza has benefited a lot because Raphael Tuju, Honorable Raphael Tuju, is also the Secretary General
of Jubilee.
Of Jubilee. But the point is he actually the people's choice from that region? So I think the president needs to be more sensitive in this particular area. When the first thing which has to be done, Tegi and the rest, audit of the national appointments. Yeah. There must be a publicly declared audit of the national appointments. Who has what and from where? These are the key drivers of our economy and the key decision makers in our politics. You can have a lawyer maybe as the MD up there, but between MD and the sweeper, there are almost 90% of you from one area. Who is driving now the company or whatever? So all these things, they must be put on the table for discussion during this national debate. So I want to echo what NCCK had said before, had proposed before.
Yes.
That there must be a constitutional conference. And during this constitutional conference, every stakeholder must be allowed to bring views. How do we want to move our country forward? The idea of Kofi Annan coming back, I think that one is now it will prove that we are not yet mature enough to manage ourselves.
Okay. You're talking about a need for an audit of appointments in this country. You also talked about appointments, and I want to challenge you both, if it's a challenge. Ultimately, what effect do they have? You are giving an example of Raphael Tuju. You're saying, yes, he is a Jubilee Secretary General. Does he have the mandate of the people? Do people want him to be there? Or is it the people's choice? What determines who's the people's choice
is it possible
in appointments?
Is it possible during the meeting, if it happens, that Raila can be asked, whom do you want? The seats are there, the audit is done, and then he gives the list of people he would like to be in, either parastatals, CSAs, or is it impossible?
So if that is possible, for example, Mutegi, if Raila says it's Mutegi Njau that he wants for a certain minister or something,
yes.
Uhuru says that so that you get a representation, your people feel they are represented. Do you think that's enough? So that Mutegi Njau is there now as from the community you come from, I should feel represented because Mutegi Njau is there?
That's what Kenyans want.
I think in my opinion, we should be in a situation where you do not have to be in power to have access to national resources. That's my position. Regardless of who is holding whatever position, every Kenyan who is a taxpayer should be able to access these resources. And I will still go back. Although we are saying this is a political situation we are in, for me it's more social. And I'm hanging on the cloaks of the people of the cloth, the religious leaders. They should reclaim their stature so that the country's leadership can have their ear. So that they can call the country's leadership and tell them, gentlemen, this is not the way of the Lord. This is not the way of God. We will pray for you so that God grants you wisdom, so that you make the right choices, so that you serve God's people unreservedly without any segregation.
I'll send a comment on two things. If you want to know our constitution has a problem, just look at the practice which is in Kenya. Losers, from especially the opposition, they have all now joined the government. In Mombasa, we saw it. In Rift Valley and everywhere. It shows you that these people, they are politicians, and they know when I'm out of the government, I will get nothing. I'll be in call for 5 years. Number one.
So, if that loser,
yes,
is given an appointment,
yes,
I come from that region, for example, I should feel represented?
No, you are not represented.
Because you're all talking about giving these appointments to different
But you've already called him a loser.
You know,
it's not the people's choice.
He lost, he's not our choice. And I believe and I'll pray that the president look at this issue. Any loser who lost and now try to join your party, if possible, I will advise the president not to give them any position, myself, number one. Number two, I think the northeastern area of this country, I think the other part of Kenya should learn from them. Because for them, many of the people who are in government, in many situations, they are the people's choice. Because they vet those people, and then the clans agree, and then they say, this is our person of choice. That's what happens. I think the entire Kenya should learn from northeastern area.
Well, it depends again in some instances where some people say they have been outnumbered by a certain clan and still feel not well represented, but that is another matter altogether.
Yes, I think apart from looking again at our constitution with those gaps notwithstanding, I would also think that we also give some considerations to what we can call negotiated democracy. To some extent, like what is happening in Northeastern, one may say this is not democracy. But the thing is, it is working for them. So what can work for us? What can enhance that national unity, that confidence in the government, the trust that we had lost? That one, we should go for it. It doesn't matter whether it may be outside the constitution, so long as it is working for the interests of the people, it is something we can embrace. Then along the way, as we are working towards reviewing our constitution, we can find these things in the constitution. can find ways of structure them into our constitution. So that as it is now, it is not that one must become desperate to join the ruling party. But if the evolution were allowed to work well, I want to say, if the evolution
you don't think it's being allowed to work?
No, it's not working well. There is complaint everywhere. Money still held at the top. And again, our governors, they are, I would say that very few of them are actually working. If you look at some of them, they are competing on how to become wealthy. They put up someone who had never had a house before, immediately becomes a governor. The following day, what you see is a mansion coming up in his backyard. The point is, there must be some checks and balances. An oversight body that can look at how our governors are working. Senators are not doing much in terms of providing oversight because they also had appetite for the same seats. And that's the reason why most of them now decided to calm down and fight the governors. Because this is where the plum, interest is. So we have to look at it all round.
Okay.
One of the reasons why NASA is setting up people's assemblies is to ultimately get the people, amend the constitution to fill those gaps that you are talking about. If the president and the opposition never met, one of the subjects to deal with is how do we amend the constitution without having to go through the people's assembly? Because we have MCAs and we have members of parliament and senate. Instead of going through that devious way of establishing people's assembly, they can negotiate and see how, through that constitutional conference, how do we amend the constitution? And they can agree. Those are things that Jubilee and NASA agreed about. They do know and they agree. We need to amend certain sections of our constitution. So instead of going through, one point of agreement is that we need to change. So why set up a people's assembly?
In 2010, sorry, Doctor, in 2010, there was a general consensus that 80% of the constitution is good, 20% is bad. After it was promulgated, have you ever seen any efforts to make sure that the 20% is made good? No, because we wrote a constitution for individuals. We wrote a constitution to make sure that our person is at the top so that it becomes our time to eat. I still go back. We need a leadership that ensures that every Kenyan, regardless of where they belong, as
even
long
after
as
devolution, Charles, you still think the constitution was about an individual?
Clearly, the person at the top has a lot of control over when and how much money goes to the county. How many times have we had stories that, oh, there was a technicality, so money was not sent to the counties, so somebody has not gotten their pay for the month?
But of course, Parliament also plays a key role in this. In fact, they are to decide how much money goes to the counties. Parliament
is about individuals, Hussein. Who was majority, who was minority? We have the numbers. Have you had such sayings?
Dr. Kenya,
yes, my brother Mutegi, you know where the problem lies, and that's why I'm saying the constitution is a problem. We have the issue of terrain of number in this country. The reason why NASA is going the People's Assembly, they have already seen that there is a problem in the Parliament. Their numbers also speak. Because anytime they come up with a bill, I'm so sure there is a side which we know the bill will take the cost because of the number.
The terrain of number.
So, you know, there's the only time when these people agree, the parliamentarians, the MC assemblies, it's only when they are talking about their salaries. And Professor, Bishop, this is where I and you and other leaders in this country should stand by our foot, make sure that these people do not increase their salary in any way whatsoever, number one. Because when it comes to salary, they will all agree. But when it comes to issues to do electoral reforms, they will do it in a way that it favors one side. Kenyans should know that this country is our place where we were born, and this is our home country. So what should happen is that anytime they pass any law, they should make sure it is for the well-being of all Kenyans. Because you are there for only 5 years, and if not 5 years, 10 years, after that you are gone. Why do you put our country in problems? Because of your own personal interests. So to our parliamentarians also, they should always fear God and make sure that they do what they were elected to go and do there.
All right, we'll take a look at a few tweets right now. Before we take a break, this is what you're saying on Twitter. I'll take a sample. Right. MC Dave says, we lost faith in the church since most of them are only interested in money. The two religious leaders have been fair, to themselves today, pointing out where the problems have been. Mtumzuri says, what about the inciters of violence? Why are we avoiding the discussion on inciters, sponsors, perpetrators of violence for political marriage? We'll talk about that shortly. Shadi Rob says, to build strong and independent institutions, we have to give chance to rule of law to prevail. Positive criticism is key. Let us not praise only when it fits our interests and condemn when it's against our interests. And Maya says, both of those who support the president and the opposers suffer joblessness, low life quality, etc. Our living standards have nothing to do with politics. Luo Russian says, appointing people from my community does not mean inclusivity. That's what I was asking. That's offering a token to your political crony. Key industries in Nyanza have been programmed to fail. That is what he says. And Keswe Philip says, you can never get peace. You can never get peace and unity in an enforcement of...
In an environment
of poverty. I can't read that clearly. That's why elections are supposed to chase from power incompetent regimes and usher in progressive and competent ones who will grow the nation for the sake of everyone. Hashtag Cheche. You're watching Cheche. We'll talk about all those issues after this break. Stay tuned.